Hello there! In this episode we look at an event that marked the beginning of Japanese isolationism, which would last until the 19th century. This is the execution of the Nagasaki martyrs in 1597. Nowadays, when we think of religion in Japan, we mostly think of Shinto and Buddhism, often even combined as many East Asian cultures like to blend different philosophies. However, European missionaries reached the islands that make up the land of the rising sun as early as the 1540s. These missionaries were mostly Spanish and Portuguese, with some Italians and Germans also going on the long journey to East Asia. In China, such clergymen had already gained great influence, becoming officials on the Ming Emperor's court and having access to the Forbidden City. The Japanese, while technically also being ruled by an emperor, the Tenno, were still somewhat less centralized. Most power lay within the shogun, who at this point was of the Ashikaga clan. The shogun used to be a military advisor of the Tenno, but a few hundred years prior they pushed the emperor into a merely ceremonial and religious role. By the time the Christian missionaries arrived, even the shogun had lost most of his influence. Instead, the various land-owning nobles, the daimyos, were caught in a never-ending struggle for supremacy, and some of them started to take interest in the European visitors. While the new religion was definitely interesting to some of them, most of the attention was drawn by their technology. The prime subject in this category was the gunpowder weapons the Christian sailors carried, weapons that could make a difference on the battlefield. The Europeans of course benefited by having a completely new market to sell their weapons on, while also gaining soft power through spreading their religion. After all, a Christian daimyo would likely fall in line with the Pope and the Christian king over his heathen shogun and Tenno. Christianity spread rapidly through Japan's southernmost island, Kyushu, with the city of Nagasaki being an early center of the religion. The faith became popular with simple folks that were at the bottom of Japan's strict social hierarchy. Some Japanese were so much into Christianity they even started joining orders, usually taking Western order names too. For example, James Kisai, who was born as Ishikawa Kisaemon. With this foothold established, the missionaries put their marks on Kyoto, hoping to repeat the success they found in China's capital. The gates to the imperial palace remained closed, however, and the Ashikaga had frankly other problems than meddling clerics. A full-blown war had broken out between the daimyos, and European and important gunpowder weapons were used on the battlefield. The Oda clan came out victorious. More on them in a future episode perhaps. The important thing is that the Ashikaga clan lost the shogunate. Yet Oda Nobunaga, who led his clan to victory, committed suicide for losing a battle before he could establish himself as shogun. Fighting broke out, and it was a man of low birth but great cunning that emerged victorious. Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi started his career as a simple foot soldier, but ended up being one of Oda's top generals and diplomats. He certainly shared his former master's sense for strategy and valued the Christian allies for their guns, but he soon realized that the stronger Christianity grew in Japan, the weaker would his already fragile position as shogun become. Converting wasn't an option either, as the more conservative daimyos would use it as a valid reason for rebellion. More troubling, Toyotomi could see in the Philippines how the Spanish treated their colonies. He became wary of them and the Portuguese trying to establish a foothold for colonization in Japan. So there was only one option he could see. Christianity had to be banned. His first decree, however, was not that radical yet. He merely banned most Europeans from entering the isle, with the exception of the Portuguese, which were still allowed to trade, as their guns had allowed Toyotomi to come into power in the first place. And then the Spanish ship San Felipe stranded on the shores of Japan. As per law, they must be expelled, yet the captain refused to submit to the shogun, claiming Spain was far more powerful than a tiny Japan. Seeing a map with the true extent of the Spanish colonial empire pushed Toyotomi over the edge. He felt certain that all Christians in Japan were only waiting for a Spanish army to arrive and topple the shogun and Tenno. So 4 months later he started to arrest any missionary he could find to bring to trial in Kyoto. Most of these were Spanish, like Pedro Bautista. However, there were also 3 Japanese Jesuit priests, James Kisai, John Soan de Goto, and Paul Miki. About 15 more Japanese converts and a few Europeans were captured and found guilty by the shogun himself. Soon after, the execution by crucifixion was ordered. Among the victims were 3 young boys. To further add insult to injury, the shogun had the left ears of the prisoners partly cut. They were then chased through Kyoto, with the bystanding population being encouraged to add to the mistreatments of the prisoners. Seeing this, supposedly 2 further Japanese converts who were not part of the imprisoned group joined their brothers in faith of their own free will. At the final stage of the procedure, all Christians were offered freedom, if they forsake that faith right there. None of them would take the offer. So at last, they were executed. Everyone, even those that weren't part of the initial trial. The least the executioners did was grant them a quick death, stabbing them with spears instead of letting them die slowly on the cross. These were unfortunately only the first 26 martyrs. Over the next decades, Toyotomi's successor as shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, would continue the path of extermination. In the end, about 70 Christians, mostly converts, lost their life in these purges. Japan entered the Edo period and completely isolated itself from the outside world, going so far as banning Japanese that had traveled abroad from re-entry into the country. The Catholic Church and many Protestant churches, however, declared all these victims martyrs, and the 3 Japanese Jesuits became saints by papal decree. The aforementioned Pedro Bautista is even one of Japan's patron saints now. As radical and terrible as this act was, it is worth noting that Japan never ended up being a colony after this event. In fact, eventually Japan would take it upon itself to start a colonial empire, but that is a story for another day. This concludes today's episode. While it certainly was a darker topic than usual for my channel, I do think it is important to shine a light on such events. As always, thank you all for watching, and thank you to my wonderful artist. See you next time. Bye!